Hello, good afternoon. Hello.
Yes, good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi. Is this a Geraldine?
Anybody is hearing?
Yes, we are.
Yes, we're hearing you.
Oh, great,
Yes,
great. I'm glad to have you all.
Camera want to position you. You're not in your face.
Hello. Can you now see my face? Is this any better?
No, piece of your head
Want
drop
to
off.
see my beautiful face?
Piece of your head gone.
Wait, top. Is this, wow. Is that any better?
That's worse. I don't see your face anymore.
Can't see me any at all?
Yes, seeing you much.
Just a minute, I'm trying to fix the camera. Are you able to see now?
Seeing the head, not your mouth.
All right, just give me a minute. Any better? What is happening now?
Not your eyes.
I am not seeing anything, and that's the reason why I can't see the screen. That the screen has been shared.
Oh.
Right, so I am not seeing anything.
When you stay like that, I seen you. I seen most of you except for your head. I seen up to your forehead.
Oh, you see my beautiful face.
Of course. It just want to go down a little bit more.
Is that
if
any
you lean
better?
back, I'm not seeing you. If I lean back, I can't see your eyes.
Oh.
If you lean back like that, I can't see your eyes. You just want to dip just a little bit more. Yeah, I can't see you now. Your eyes gone.
Is this any better?
Share the screen and set the camera and then I share back the screen. You are the person sharing the screen?
No.
Oh.
You want to stop other sharing screen? No, because
I'm not seeing you now. I'm not seeing your face now.
Yeah, man, I soon fix it. Sister Latoya? Sister Latoya? Oh, I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it now. I'm seeing where I am.
Right.
No, you're still not seeing me.
Much better.
It's much better now?
Yes.
I know you all want to see my beautiful face, you know. So I have to fix the camera for that.
Okay.
Yes, you have to fix the camera for that.
Do we have our guest speakers? Our guest speakers are here. You could just unmute and let us know if you're here. Hello, Sister Sharon.
Yes, I am. Sharon is here in the flesh.
Welcome, my darling. How are you today?
I am doing exceptionally well.
Great.
I'm just coming from another meeting.
Oh my, oh my. I know, I can imagine.
Yes.
This is your time of the year.
Yes.
When you're
Tomorrow
very
ends the
busy.
16 days. Yes, it has
I
been
can
breathless, but
imagine.
we have enjoyed every second of it.
I know. All right. Thank you so much for coming.
You're so welcome.
Do we have Miss Mason? Dr. Mason? Jillian, is she here? Hello?
Not here as yet.
I'm seeing Sister Gibson from the beautiful twin island of Trinidad and Tobago. Sister
Hello,
Gibson?
yes, I'm here. Hello.
Great, glad to have you.
Yes.
It's so
same
good
here.
for you to be here. Is our president on?
No, he's not here as yet.
Oh, he's not there as yet. Our first VP, is she there?
Not as yet.
All right. Can you say, Sister Helen, how soon? We'll have to wait for them to join us.
Mr. Shani, not Mr. Helen.
Oh, hi, Shani. How are you?
Hi, I am well, thank you.
Can you say how soon we will be joined by the president and our monitoring officer, our first VP?
Let me check.
Ooh. Why is my camera giving me all that I'm looking for? Still don't like what I'm looking at.
Geraldine, while I'm up, can I just try sharing my screen and then close it just to make sure that it works?
Yes. Can we give Miss Sister Coburn Robinson sharing rights?
Sure, no problem.
Why is this thing not staying focused, Lord?
Okay, so
Properly.
let's see. Hold on.
Good afternoon.
Let's see what I. Yeah.
All right, that's much better.
Oh, yeah, right.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Hi, welcome first VP. Welcome. Glad to have you.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I'm not sure if the other participants are hearing you.
Thank you so much.
I'm waiting. Sister Coburn, did you get to share your screen? Sister Sharon? Sister Sharon Coburn? Hello?
Shadi.
She has sharing rights.
She has sharing rights? Just ask her. She had asked for
Yes.
permission to share her screen to see
Right,
if it works.
I started,
Yes.
but I didn't open my, open the
Okay.
file. So let me try one more time.
Yes,
but
yes,
I'm not
please.
seeing, it's open now, but I'm not seeing the one. Let me go to files, see if I find it. I'm not seeing it, so I'm not sure why. It's supposed to be open on my desktop.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not seeing it. No. All right, so I will have to try again. It's okay, you can proceed. I will just
All right.
open it on my desktop and then go back. So you can proceed.
Sure. And we're waiting on President Grant. I guess Miss Mason will join us later on I didn't want to start without our specially invited guests. It's lovely to see a gentleman. It's good. Good to see a gentleman. I see a Richard Hutchinson. Hi, Brother Richard.
Hi, sister. How are you today?
I am good, thanks. It's good to have you, man.
Yes, man. It's always good to be in the house.
Yes, have you invited any of your other brothers to
Yes,
join
I have.
us?
Yes, I have. I've sent the emails and I've sent the WhatsApp. So I'm expecting some other persons to join.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you again.
No problem.
I am going to wait probably another 5 or so minutes before we start. Unfortunately, we'll start after our designated time, which is 2 o'clock. So I'll give President Grant probably another 5 or 10 minutes for him to join us. I'm not sure what's happening with Sister Mason, Jillian Mason from Women's Inc.
I'm here.
Oh, oh my. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much, Doc. It's good to have you, my sister.
Yes, no problem.
We do look forward to your presentation.
Yes. Sorry about that.
You're getting to share now, Sister Coburn?
Yes, yes, I did it. Thank you so much for waiting.
All right, great, great. Sister Shanae? Sister Grant? Sister
Yes,
Grant?
Sister Geraldine. Yes,
Any
Sister Geraldine.
update on President Grant?
I sent you a message.
Oh, you sent me a message. Oh, let me see if I can find that message. This is not what I want. Let's see what's happening.
Come, Asha.
Where you sent me the message, Sister Grant? I'm not seeing
In
anything
the
here.
chat. It's in the chat.
All right, let me look, let me go back and go to the chat. Oh, one. Okay, all right. We have with us a few persons and we aren't going to wait any longer because we are running behind the time. So I would love for us to begin our webinar. First VP, Sister Tisha Clark Griffiths, our monitoring officer for the JCSA Women's Action Committee. Co-chair, Sister Latoya Spence. Specially invited guests, Sister J. Coburn, Sister Gillian Mason, Sister Sophia Gibson. Other invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this webinar. In this webinar, we will be taking a look at gender-based violence, its impact on society, both locally and regionally. All things considered, we will expound and examine what constitutes violence, what are some of the types of violent behaviors inflicted on our women, men, and girls, what medium is available to actually recognize and identify instances of abuse, and how do we speak up, speak out against these behaviors. Now, internationally, we have 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, and it's an annual campaign. It kicks off on the 25th of November, and it runs for 16 days and end on the 10th of December, which is recognized also as Human Rights Day. It started in the US, the Women's Global Leadership Institute in 1991, and it continues to be coordinated each year by the Center for Women's Global Leadership. Individuals and organizations around the world use it to organize a strategy to call for the prevention and elimination of violence against women and girls. And I would like to include men. In support of this global initiative, we at the Jamaica Civil Service Association and especially our Women's Action Committee has planned 3 main events. We had a demonstration, a peaceful demonstration. It is a walk, but we didn't go on the streets. We did it within our confines And there should be a video or something that is placed. I think there is something that is being done to be placed on our Facebook page. We are having this webinar today, and tomorrow we will have a candlelight vigil where we will be honoring those who have survived and those who died. We will sympathize with them and the family. We are inviting persons to actually come out. We have candles if you so wish. We can provide you with candles. You just pick them up at the association. But today I want to welcome you to this webinar, those who are here locally, and our sister Gibson, who is actually in TNT at this time. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you. Before we go further though, I would like to pray and ask for God's guidance and is understanding of the issues that we are facing, and give us wisdom and the knowledge as to how to deal with the situation. Because of course, I can tell you that violence against women, girls, gender-based violence can be considered as another pandemic that we are countering right now. And especially with the COVID-19 pandemic, it's getting worse. And so let us just invite God's presence. Let us bow our heads as we pray. Eternal God, our Father, we thank you for this moment as we come gathered, Lord Jesus, in this fashion. We ask for your presence, for your guidance, and Lord Jesus, more than anything else, your wisdom, your knowledge and understanding, that we may combat, Lord Jesus, this pandemic, this crisis that is affecting our women and our girls. Our men also, Lord Jesus, is involved. And so we are asking, Lord, that you guide us, open our hearts, open our minds, Lord Jesus, so that we might look at the things, expound the things, Lord, that are necessary and that will help us to battle this pandemic. Lord, we continue to ask that you hasten the footsteps of those who are to be here, Lord, that they might join us and come with their questions, Lord Jesus, their answers to some of the problems that we will be discussing. Father, we ask for your mercies, and we ask that you continue to be with us as we tell you thanks. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Amen.
All right, we are going to go into our program. And at this time, Brother O'Neill is unable to join us. And so I await his arrival. And when he comes, then we will acknowledge him. For the time being, I'm going to ask our Sister Tisha Clark Griffiths, who I said before is our first Vice President of the Jamaica Civil Service Association, and also our monitoring officer for the Women's Action Committee. Let us welcome our sister to the podium, the virtual podium, I should say.
Thank you so much, Sister
You are welcome, my
Geraldine.
sister.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone who are online. Thank you for taking the time out of this busy afternoon to join us. So to discuss such an issue that is so critical and important to all of us, I want to especially extend my gratitude to the co-chairs, Sisters Geraldine and Sister Latoya, members of the Women's Action Committee, of course, our Men's Coalition for partnering with us even during our walk, and they are actually online supporting us,
yes,
as well as our General Council members, members of staff, or specially invited guests. I know that you have a lot to do, but you took the time out, and we are appreciative of the time that you took to join us and to share with us. For those who are visiting, thank you. This is such an important issue to all of us, and so I am happy that we are here to discuss the matter. First of all, let me just say that this webinar was planned because of the importance and the increase in which we have seen violence against our women. As a matter of fact, gender-based violence on a whole. Just this week, we have had a situation where we lost a teacher and a 6-year-old. Now, for 2021, marks the 30th anniversary of the global activism, 16 days of activism against gender-based violence campaign, which runs, of course, Sister Geraldine would have said, runs from November 25th, which is the International Day Against Violence Against Women, to December 10th, which is International Human Rights Day. And even in the 16 days of activism, we are still having violence and losing our women and girls. And so, inspired by the original vision and history of the campaign, the focus on raising awareness about violence against women and considering the continued impunity for femicide. And this year campaign focused on the issue of femicide, or the gender-related killing of women. And in 2021, in addition to the anniversary theme, the campaign continued to focus on activities to end gender-based violence in the world of work by focusing on the link between domestic violence and the world of work, and drawing on legal standard outlining ILO and International Labour Organization, ILO 190. And for those of you who have not read it, I think it is quite insightful that you should. ILO Convention C190 and Recommendation 206. But Sister Geraldine alluded to this. Since the pandemic have started, there were new challenges which call for individual and collective solutions. The Women Action Committee will continue our efforts to, not just in the 16 days of activism, but all year round, to advance human rights. We will continue our efforts as we try to end violence against women, girls. As a matter of fact, gender-based violence, which demands our unparalleled courage and joint action to make this vision a reality. For this reason, we are here today to bring attention to the scourge that has taken over our society, especially during this pandemic. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for giving us support. And thank you for participating in this webinar. Good afternoon, and I do wish for us a very productive webinar. Over to you, Sister Geraldine.
Thank you so very much, Sister Tisha. You are indeed our wonderful monitoring officer who has been helping us, leading us, and guiding us along the path. It is indeed a pandemic. A lot of things are happening with regards to women being abused. And I read, I think on Monday when we had our walk, that every 14.6 seconds, a man is being abused by his wife or his girlfriend. And I am appalled, I am surprised at that figure. 16, call it 15 seconds, our gentleman is being abused. I can imagine how often then a woman who is regarded as the lesser of the two, the male and the female, the lesser gender, is being abused. But we hope after 30 years, we can actually stop the scourge. As Sister Tisha has said, just this week, a teacher and her 6-year-old was actually killed. It is sad. It is sad. I'm happy that we are here talking about it, but it's a very, very sad occasion where our women, and many of them are unable to do anything because of the dependency on the men and all of that. But we are going to see what we can do. I'm telling you, we are trying, and we will raise awareness in whatever way we can at whatever event. And I know Sister Coburn Robinson has been doing a great deal. This is her forte. This is where she shines. as one of the forerunners in trying to eliminate or to, contain the violence against women and I want to say gender-based violence. She's going to be one of our speakers today, and she's the first presenter that we have. We have Sister Sharon Coburn Robinson. She's the Principal Director, Gender Affairs in the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment, and Sport. Sharon has been involved in the development of social policy as well as qualitative social and action research since completing her postgraduate studies in gender and development studies at the University of the West Indies at Mona in 2001. So it's basically what, 29 years, Sister Sharon? Nobody can beat that experience. Her experiential background is in the cross-cutting discipline of gender and the development studies. Her experiential background in the cross-cutting discipline of gender and development studies significantly impacts her ability to communicate, empathize, create, adjust, and gel well with persons from varied backgrounds, personalities, and worldviews. Sharon represents the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment, and Sport locally, regionally, and internationally at conferences, workshops, and other training fora. Additionally, she enjoys the meaningful engagement of multiple publics as a trainer, facilitator at various fora, and conducts gender-specific workshops in keeping with the ministry's gender mainstreaming mandate. An optimistic, dynamic, and result-driven individual, Sharon Faith keeps her grounded and serves as an impetus for her personal mantra, which is what you make happen for others, God will make happen for you. Let us welcome, a hearty welcome to one of the fighters for the elimination of gender-based violence in Jamaica, Sister Sharon Coburn Robinson.
Thank you so much, Geraldine.
You are
Thank
welcome,
you so
Sister
much.
Sharon.
Yes, I am very ecstatic about just being a part of this. I remember speaking with Latoya earlier, and I know that she was very excited about doing this because everybody wants to be a part of the 16 days of activism. And, I'm glad you got on because tomorrow is the last day.
Yes.
So, we caught it just in time. I know Latoya had plans along with the rest of our team to do something else. But
yes,
based on our discussion, we changed that plan. And now I'm seeing that you're having that walk as well, which is going to be very important because as you know, and as we all know, advocacy is extremely important. Advocacy and activism, just having a knowledge of it is not good enough. Just being angry alone is not enough. If you actually get up and start doing stuff, that's how you're going to get results.
That's right.
Right. So I have the privilege of just speaking with you very quickly about the organization, because I know not everybody knows enough about the Bureau. And so every chance I get to talk about my space, I share information on what we're doing. I heard you say that we are working assiduously, and this is something we do in partnership, because as you know, there is absolutely no way that we can work in a silo. That is of the past. So we work in partnership with other key stakeholders. So the Bureau, of course, for those who know or for those who don't know, is strategically positioned in the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment, and Sport. And we are therefore the focal point on the National Gender Mainstreaming Program. And that National Gender Mainstreaming Program has different units which are a part of it. There's a policy and research unit, which does the research and the policy work and the documentation, dissemination of information, and so on. And that feeds into the community outreach work, which we do at the community level. And we are happy to have a very brand new unit. It's our national shelter unit. And that's because we now have a national shelter that has been open to the public since last year, but we started receiving clients in 2021. And we are ecstatic about that. Very soon, in a couple of days, we will be opening the second shelter, which is going to be our first regional center. And that shelter will complement the existing national shelter. We also have another arrangement under a public-private partnership agreement with Women Inc., where they are a part of the COPE initiative. I saw Mrs. Hewitt's name on this webinar, the flyer. And so I'm sure that when she comes, she'll be able to speak as well about her experience just working with survivors, as well as persons who will need a space from time to time, whether they want to come into the space physically or they are just wanting psychosocial support and counseling, referrals, and 9 yards.
Right.
I also want to say that we became gender in 2016, and that's because there was a cabinet decision that was made and it was submitted and approved to allow us to become gender affairs. Prior to now, you would have known us as women's affairs. While we were women's affairs, we had a focus on men, but the fact that the name change allowed us to more definitively mainstream gender and include men in a more definitive way. So I just tell you very quickly some of our roles and functions, because you might not be so aware of all the things we do. I mentioned some of them earlier, when I talked about the research unit, the policy and research unit, there's a community liaison that does first level intervention. And I might say here that while we have the Bureau of Gender Affairs in one space in St. Andrew in Halfway Tree, we have a regional reach and we have a local spread. So we are across communities in Jamaica, urban communities, urban town centers and rural communities, underserved communities. And that's because we have social workers, we have rural sociologists, and we have other staff members who go to spaces on invitation, or sometimes we invite ourselves because we recognize that the work is necessary. And sometimes we take material to different communities if it's an information fair, or they're doing some amount of sensitization, a blitz around something that happened, could be in the ZOSO districts when there's a increase in the crimes reported, particularly against women and girls. And through that, we do a significant amount of public education. We do training and sensitization and awareness raising on a range of gender-specific issues. And particularly now that we have our sexual harassment legislation, which was approved, we are very ecstatic about the fact that it was so long in coming. And, so many persons kept agitating about it. And we're very happy that it was approved. I do have my copy, and it says the second day of November 2021. So this is it. So I'm very happy that we have it, and it will become official based on a conversation I had with my minister this morning at a session we had. It's going to become official come January 2022. The other part I want to tell you about our work is the project implementation and monitoring. So while we are a government entity within a ministry, we do have projects that we take on from time to time, because that's also short-term support that we will get through financing, grant support from international development partners. And so at this point, we are a part of the Spotlight Initiative. I think most persons by now would be aware of the Spotlight Initiative, and that is a country program that allows us to be able to do a significant amount of work on family violence. That's the focus for Jamaica. So we focus at the policy level because we're a policy-driven entity. And this focus at the policy level is designed to ensure that the gender analysis is integrated in all national policies, plans, programs, and projects. Now, we do this also through our gender focal points, and I think some of our gender focal points might also be on this call because our gender focal points are everywhere. So once you are nominated by your space, the person responsible head in your space, your PS or your director general, executive director, principal director, whoever is in charge in your space, and you are selected as somebody who will be leading the charge on the gender mainstreaming focus in your space, you would go through a period of training, sensitization and awareness raising. During that process, you create your own action plan that will be nuanced to the look and feel of your space, looking at what is required, doing a needs-based assessment and a situation analysis, risk-based assessment and so on, and seeing what is required, what you would need to implement, what you need to fix, what you need to change. It could be new things you want to implement because you sense that something is not going right, or you could just want to shore up on your governance procedures, or you might just want to make things a little more inclusive so that everybody is incorporated and there's no one who squeals, discrimination, or victimization or feels left behind. We also promote the analysis of the gender differential impact of development initiatives. Now, I heard you, Geraldine, mention the importance of engaging men and boys in this fight to eliminate gender-based violence, because most of the victims that we have coming forward are women. And so in order for us to eliminate gender-based violence, we cannot just look at women alone. That's and right, girls. Yes. We have to look at women against the persons who are coming forward as perpetrators, as well as the boys, so that we don't have them becoming men who are violent. Yes. So at this point, I want to introduce you to our National Strategic Action Plan to eliminate gender-based violence in Jamaica. It's a long name, and so we call it NSAP GBV for short, or just plain NSAP. It is a 10-year plan, and it was approved in 2017. It takes us to 2027. We are halfway through that plan. And so at this point, 2022, when we step into 2022, God's willing, we will be doing our first midterm review for the first 5 years to see how well we did, what areas we needed to change, to fix, to adjust, if we needed to modify some of our indicators and so on. So that will take us into the second part of our 10-year plan. Now, this NSAP is very important to us because it is raising the tray for doing work on gender-based violence. And this plan promotes, therefore, a coordinated, integrated, multi-sectoral and structured approach to addressing gender-based violence, which we like to call GBV for short. It also addresses the key issues and challenges that are associated with gender-based violence. It facilitates a cutting-edge approach to treating with victims/survivors, perpetrators, and witnesses. In some spaces, people do not like to talk about victims because victims suggest passivity, as if you have no choice, as if you have given in, you accept the violence. And so we encourage persons to not see themselves as a victim. So even if you have not yet worked out your plan, your escape plan, and you don't know how soon you're going to leave this toxic relationship and this place that is not safe, if you see yourself as a survivor, that's the first way of acknowledging that you are very much integral to your own survival, and you will just get, as you progress, the support that you require so that you can move from being a victim to a survivor. Now, the perpetrators are the ones we also need to focus on, because we need to unpack the why of what they're doing. So why are you a perpetrator and how can we help you? And we have a few programs. The most recent one is our Refocus Perpetrator Intervention Program, which we are doing with the Ministry of Justice under the Restorative Justice Program. And then we come to the witnesses. The witnesses sometimes are children, and that's painful. When a child witnesses his or her parent being victimized or violated, it's very, very bad. It's not something you can sometimes erase. The memory is just there. And so we have to work with them once they have experienced it or witnessed it. We have to work with them. In our shelter, we also have some children who have witnessed violence, witnessed their parents being violated, and also have experienced their own share of violence. The NSAP also incorporates a socially inclusive human rights centered approach, which is the way to go to make sure that your human rights are factored in and there's no discrimination. It promotes, therefore, strategic linkages and synergies among multiple stakeholders, national policies, as you know, there are several policies around, plans, which you might have in your space, programs, and projects which you are rolling out. It also provides guidance regarding the commitments on the agreements that we have. It guides stakeholders, it serves as a guide, and it looks at the inclusive approach, making sure that all persons are a part of what it is. Now, there are 5 strategic priority areas. So it subscribes to the due diligence framework, and it's broken out under 5 areas. The first one is prevention. How do you prevent gender-based violence from happening? The second one is protection. So you have become a victim or you are a survivor of violence, but you still need protection. How do we protect you? Is it a shelter that you need? Is it that you need psychosocial support and counseling? Is it that you need to know the laws that are in place to protect you? The third one is investigation, prosecution, and enforcement of court orders. And this one speaks to the prosecutorial arm of the justice system. How do we make sure that once the crime is committed, once somebody has been violated, that you make sure that you lodge that complaint? If you aren't able to do that, that you get support on doing that, that you make sure that if you take out a protection order, if it is breached, violated, or dropped, that there is support for you. The next two would be, why am I going the other way?
Ms. Colbert,
Okay. Yes,
Robinson, we're not seeing this the slide. It's stuck.
You're not
sharing.
We're not it's stuck on the first slide, so we're just listening to you. We're not
Okay.
actually seeing as you go along.
I'm sorry,
So
I'm not sure why. I'm not sure why,
Yeah.
because
But continue, because we're hearing you quite fine.
That's fine. So I will do the other two. I did 3. I'm doing 2 more because I don't have much time. So I'm trying to go as quickly as I can, not to breach. Since I'm first, I don't want to hog the show. The 4th one is enforcement of victims' rights to compensation, reparation, and redress. And the 5th would be protocols for coordination of the NSAP. And that is to make sure that there is a data system that is robust and that there are systems that are working. So there are a few objectives for the plan itself, and I'll just go quickly. The first one is the very large oversight one, which is to provide an oversight for gender-based violence and to make sure that whatever laws and bits of legislations and policies that are in place, that they work in concert with what is in place and all key stakeholders to ensure that the work gets done. Another one is to provide adequate support for the survivors, as well as to look very critically at the perpetrators of violence, as well as the witnesses. Another is to standardize protocols. So we have a complaints and response protocol, which looks at how can we standardize how we collect the data and how do we treat the victims who come forward for support, who need to have support based on what is happening to them. How do we standardize that? Another one is to ensure that, Another one is to ensure that there is a certain amount of data collection going on. Once the data is collected, we analyze the data and we make sure that it goes out to persons so they are aware of what the data is showing. So that allows us to identify trends and patterns of gender-based violence and to formulate strategies, particularly for those persons who are underserved and vulnerable. So I'll just take a minute now to tell you quickly about a few of the amendments that were made to the Domestic Violence Act, because I'm sure you might be wondering, what are those recommendations that were accepted? So I'll just tell you that the Joint Select Committee, there was a Joint Select Committee some time ago. I think we had 2 rounds of it. And this committee was charged with the responsibility of having a robust conversation on the Domestic Violence Act and to look at the amendments that were being proposed by persons who put forward submissions to the commission, to the committee, the Joint Select Committee. And what was approved at this point would be a few, and the others are going to be put forward when the next committee is able to send those forward. So the first one is that there was no specific definition of gender-based, of domestic violence in the Act. And so now there is a specific definition, and this definition is broad enough. It recognizes the physical, sexual, emotional, and psychological aspects of domestic violence. The second one is the expansion of the range of domestic violence to include the release of intimate pictures of partners, whether you're still in a relationship or not. And sometimes this is used to inflict reputational and emotional harm on victims. Sometimes it's a third party who harasses. And so this expansion of the range is designed to assist persons to make sure that whoever it is that is a victim of this act of gender-based violence or domestic violence it is, that you can get redress under the Domestic Violence Act. A third one is that the power of the court has been increased to grant a protection order or an occupation order. So the Minister of Gender has been given residual powers to act on behalf of victims and survivors of gender-based violence. The Bureau of Gender Affairs, Women's Resource and Outreach Center, which is called ROC, are put forward as authorized entities to act on behalf of victims and survivors who apply for a protection order. The fine has been increased from $10,000 to $1 million. And we intend to go higher as well when the committee that's going to be doing the discussion, to continue the discussion when they are complete. Another one, I just have 2 more to go. One is that stronger penalties have been put in place to address the issue of enforcement, particularly in cases where the protection orders are breached. And the final one, under the ones that were approved, is that the institutional framework has been strengthened for the more effective operation of the Domestic Violence Act. You might have seen also that under the Spotlight Initiative, there has been an increase in the domestic violence intervention centers We work very closely with them under the JCF and other service providers. We also are preparing a robust gender-based violence referral pathway, again, through support from the Spotlight Initiative, largely under Pillar 4. And this will allow us to be able to take complaints, take persons who want to talk about what is happening, and to provide the sources that they need, the services that they need to go to, who is able to support them, what is required, what is in place, and so on. And the final thing I want to say is that I would have mentioned the sexual harassment legislation already. I mentioned the Domestic Violence Act, and all of these bits and pieces of legislation would have been legislation that would either have been around before, needed to be revised, amended, or new legislation that came in because of the need. So we continue as a part of the gender architecture to work with key stakeholders. And we're very happy that the Jamaica Civil Service Association has continued every year since they started to have something that allows for the sensitization and awareness raising on gender-based violence. We believe that it is important to do advocacy and activism because that is how you're going to share the information. Information is power. It allows you to have strategies, and partnerships are important. We are very happy for this, and we have learned so many lessons from the partnership with the Jamaica Civil Service Association and other partners. So at this point, I think I will close now. And I can take questions later on to allow other persons to speak. Thank you so much again for the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you to Sister Coburn Robinson. It's a pleasure listening to you. I have some questions, but as you say, we will take it at the end of all the presentations. We're asking persons just to write down your questions. So at the end of the presentations, all three presentations, then we will be able to ask our questions and get the appropriate person answering those questions. At this time, we want to thank Sister Coburn for making that presentation, looking at the work of the ministry, especially her department, the Bureau of Gender Affairs. It's very important. It's very, very important because this thing is happening over time, and it is important that we bring it forward, bring it to the fore. And of course, the Ministry of Gender Affairs and Entertainment, Sports, and so on is able to have this bureau where we can focus on what is happening with gender-based violence. At this time, we will have a musical video as well as a presentation on the walk that we actually did on Monday in recognition of this very important problem. You can go ahead with the video. Are we hearing?
No, I'm not hearing.
I am not hearing either. Sister Latoya? Hello?
Hi, Sister Geraldine.
Yes.
Just fixing the. While you're waiting, let me apologize to everyone for joining late. I'm actually out in the field doing some walkthroughs at various MDAs and could not have joined at the time that I was requested. So if you don't mind.
No, we don't.
Okay, excellent. Let me commend our Women's Action Committee for organizing this event to commemorate the 16 days of activism for the elimination of violence against women. And in particular, we are advocating against gender-based violence in all its forms. The Jamaica Civil Service Association is extremely proud that we have been able to follow this path every year. And we have signaled our intention to continue doing so, both locally, regionally, and internationally. And I I'm extremely excited that our reach for this particular event has gone well beyond our shores, and that our colleagues in the diaspora have actually joined on to participate in the presentations and to learn a bit more. I'm also pleased that our men have shown up in numbers to be a part of this webinar. And it is a signal to all of us that we do now recognize that gender-based violence affects all of the genders, not just women, it affects men as well. And we can extend that to boys and girls. So it is just a few words of greeting that I'm extending to all gathered, and a commendation to the Women's Action Committee for organizing this event, and continue to do well, continue to raise that banner as we bring attention to the scourge of violence in our homes. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, President Grant. I didn't recognize it was you at first, but I just want to welcome you, welcome our General Secretary, Sister Tiffany Powell. Thank you so much for bringing that greetings, Brother Grant. I want to welcome those persons who are just joining us. Better late than never, and we have much more to go. You have missed the presentation by Sister Coburn Robinson. However, it has been taped, so we know we can, it is being recorded, so we know we can provide the recordings. Thank everybody for actually being here. At this time, we are going to be having a video presentation. It's a musical video, and also a presentation based on our walk on Monday. Sister Latoya?
I think Brother President needed to say something else, Sister Geraldine.
Brother Grant? Where is he? Brother Grant? He's out in the field.
Yes, you just indicated that you had a difficulty recognizing that it was me.
Yes.
But yes, I changed my name temporarily to Tiffany Powell Williams, but it is I.
Okay. Okay. It's not because you are being abused?
Not at all.
Okay, great, great. We still are happy to have you. Thank you so much. My co-host, Sister Latoya, you ready for us?
Can you hear it? Can you hear?
Yes, it's coming on now.
I'm only trying to recover, get better from that disaster of you and I. It got harder. My emotions took me over, no longer in pain, no more stronger than my beaten jaw. What kind of man would hurt the one he said he loved 2 months ago? You're a coward, no more stronger even than my beaten jaw. I am not your punching bag. Give me back the blood you spilled. You may cause this pain I'm in, but this game you'll never win. No, no. This time you had to go. Oh, you took advantage of new opportunities. Told me lies of how you love me when you only wanted to abuse me. Things got nasty. You started to say you hate me, but I still loved you. I was blinded, I was a fool. Emotionally drained, don't know how I could sustain all those blows. Don't know what kind of man would hurt the one he said he loved to hurt to know. See, you're a coward, no more stronger, even than my beating drum. I am not your punching bag. Give me back the blood you spilled. You may cause this pain I'm in, but this game you'll never win. No, no. This time you had to come. All I did was love you. All I did was care. All I did was sacrifice just to prove how much I cared. But then you shared and you mocked me, and you spat right in my face, and you pulled the locks from out my boots as you truly scarred my face. All I did was look at you as the man I love. All I did was sacrifice just to prove my love. But then you dared and you mocked me, and you spat right in my face, and you pulled the locks from off my boots as you truly scarred my face. I'm only trying to recover, get better from that disaster of you and I.
All right, that was Bella Blair and her experience being a punching bag. She's asking back for her dignity. She loved us so much. And of course, she suffered so much. It's a sad song. I don't know, once you are being abused many times, you lose your self-esteem, your dignity, and so many things with it. But today we are bringing attention to it, and we are sympathizing, we are empathizing with those persons who have been abused, who are being abused. And I am glad, Sister Coburn, I am hearing that there is now facilities available for these persons, both male and female, to actually seek refuge and to get out of the situation. We have another video, and this is what happened on Monday, where we are calling and we are bringing awareness to our fellow brothers and sisters to try to help us to end this scourge, this violence against the women, boys, girls, and men alike. Our video, Sister Latoya. All right, thank you so much, Sister Latoya, for sharing that. Thank you so much for sharing the collage and the rest of pictures that we actually took when we did our walk on Monday. We might not have walked on the road as we had desired, but we did walk through the park, and we did call for the elimination of violence against women, boys, girls, and men. At this time, we should have a presentation by Sister Russell from the Ministry of Justice looking at human trafficking and expounding whether or not it is seen as a crime, as an abuse against our genders. But it is, I can tell you, because I've been to several of the sessions that they have had, that human trafficking is a problem, and it is indeed a violation against the individual's rights and so on, because some of those rights are actually taken away from you, and many of the persons in human trafficking are abused and of course are degraded, and a lot of things, their moral, their self-esteem has been taken away, and so it is indeed abuse against the individuals. Unfortunately, the sister we're supposed to be presenting will not be here. She has another engagement, and so she sent her apologies. We are also sorry that we are not able to actually hear her presentation. However, we will move on. We have another presentation by our sister Mason. Oh, before we go there, we have a video, but before we do that video, we will actually bring on Sister Latoya, our other co-chair, who is Sister Latoya Spence, and she will be talking about the work of WAC. Sister Latoya?
Yes, Sister Geraldine, thank you. Before I do my presentation, there's a video that I'd like to share.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
Okay.
It's for the members, no matter where you live in Jamaica.
Hello, could you
Sister Tiffany, can you please mute?
Close your mics, please? Thank you.
Many of the girls and women in my community were abused. We were just normal because we are not equal. At 15, I was abducted and forced to marry a man many years older than me. He physically and sexually abused me. I fell pregnant. I had a beautiful girl, but I worried. I knew only too well the suffering that awaited her. They performed female genital mutilation on her, cut in the same way that I have been, and my mother, and all the girls, to make us pure, so we would be accepted. It was a lonely time. My husband was violent. I had no money, no friends, and I gave birth to 3 more girls. One day, I met other women just like me from a women's rights group. They taught me so much, such as the dangers of female genital mutilation, that it's even punishable by law. It was September, when female genital mutilation is usually performed in our community. But now, I was not scared. I knew our rights. Finally, I convinced him not to cut the girls. I told him it's a crime and I'll report him to the court. I've joined the women's rights group and now help other women. We help each other. I also teach my daughters about their rights and have sent them to school. I dream of a different, better future for them.
Thank you, Sister Latoya. Hello, Sister Latoya. Hello.
Yes, Geraldine, I'm here.
Yeah, but I can hardly hear you.
Yes, my mic was muted. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Latoya Spence, public sector worker and one of the co-chair of the Women's Action Committee at the JCSA. I'll be doing a presentation on the JCSA WAC, Women's Action Committee, that is. All right, just give me a second. All right, I'm just gonna briefly outline why we exist and what is our purpose in a committee at the Jamaica Civil Service Association. It says here that the Jamaica Civil Service Association Women's Action Committee is set out to empower and support women by addressing and advocating women's rights. We look at policies and activities that are of interest to the women in the civil service. How we accomplish this? We network with institutions that provide the relevant training. We try to develop our women. We advocate and we promote gender equality and positive change in the status of our women to better able them to cope in the workplace and the wider society. What is the mission statement? This information was garnered from previous literature that was found at the association, and it states that we ensure that women's rights are effectively represented in civil society. Why do we exist? We provide a space or an avenue for women so that we can discuss topical issues and how they impact them. Some of these issues include gender-based violence against women rather, and inequality in pay and how they are treated in the workplace. We also promote gender balance by collaborating with other committees within the association. So for example, with the Men's Coalition team, we would have partnered in the past to get some activities off the ground. And we also would have partnered with the Young Workers Group to get some other activities off. We advise on ways of promoting and developing women in the trade union. We advise on education and programs. Just a second, I'm not seeing this thing here. Sorry. We organize and celebrate We advise on education and training programs and activities for women.
Excuse me, Sister Latoya, some person said they are not hearing you. I'm not sure why.
All right, I should go again.
No,
Sister
you
Mason,
don't have
are
to
you
go again.
hearing?
Just speak louder into the mic.
Okay, sir.
Is Sister Mason from Women's Inc. Oh, go ahead, she's hearing.
Okay. All right, we provide a space for women to discuss topical issues such as violence against women, sexual harassment, and bullyism in the workplace, and how these issues affect them. We will also look at that. We promote gender balance, where we organize events in collaboration with other committees like the Young Workers Committee and the Men's Coalition Committee. So in the past, we would have done events that is geared towards our women group. We advise on ways to promote the full development of women's potential in the trade unions and at work. We advise on education and training programs and activities for women. We advocate. One of the main roles of the Women's Action Committee is to advocate and to be the voice of women in the public sector. So where there are issues in the public sector, whenever they are brought to our attention, it is expected that we would be the voice for these women. We advise and assist with research and dissemination of information. Also, we advise and assist. We act as a support system for women members, and we promote the integration of gender into the work and activities of CPSA and its affiliates. That's Caribbean Public Sector Association. We organize and celebrate regional and international events relating to women, in that we partner with PSI as well to do those events. We promote the involvement of women in CPSA education and training programs and activities, and we recognize and reward the contribution of women in the trade union. Ongoing training and development program. The committee continues to engage organizations and groups to facilitate learning sessions and the exchange of information to transform the status of women in the union. Sexual harassment and gender-based violence has become even greater issues in workplace and homes, especially since the COVID pandemic. Why? Because based on the work from home arrangement, persons are more confined to work and they are exposed to violence from their partners, and their children too are exposed to violence. So we find that there's an increased rate of violence against women in this time. How is WAC involved? Between 2005 to 2015, the main agenda for Women's Action Committee was geared towards training and development and philanthropy, some of which are carried out jointly with the Young Workers Committee. Some of these activities are listed here. In the past, we have had treat for the children in the current community. There was an essay competition. We have had vigils. We have partners with other organizations to campaign, like on International Women's Day, and to eliminate violence against women as well. Women's Action Committee, we have always been seeking partnership with other women's groups, such as the Women's Inc. We have also engaged with the Bureau of Gender Affairs from time to time to get literature, to get updates on what is happening in that arena. We have partnered with, it's a process that commences with the British Council so that we can advocate on issues concerning the women and girls especially. And in doing so, we build awareness through these campaigns. Statistics have shown that high murder rate of women in Jamaica is a consequence of gender-based violence. Nearly 1/3 of women, Nearly 1/3 of women report experiencing physical or sexual violence at the hands of their partner in their lifetime. Children are also victims of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. And this was stated earlier in the presentation by our sister Sharon. And it also states that globally, reports of domestic abuse have increased since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. Through the JCSA WAC, we will continue to lobby with the government of Jamaica to amend laws intended to prevent GBV and protect our women and girls. We are also pushing for ratification of ILO Convention 190 on violence and harassment in the world of work. Also, changes to national laws in line with the C-190 Convention and the inclusion of gender-based violence clauses in collective bargaining agreements. These laws include the Sexual Harassment Bill, Domestic Violence Act, Offenses Against the Persons Act, Sexual Offences Act, and Child Care and Protection Act. Please help us to protect our ladies, our women, mothers, wives, girlfriends, aunts, nieces, daughters, and friends from gender-based violence. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much, Sister Latoya, for looking at the work of the Jamaica Civil Service Association and specifically the Women's Action Committee. Indeed, we are a group of women who are trying to bring awareness and bring about equality in the workplace and strengthening, empowering our women. And that's the reason why we are having this focus today on gender-based violence. Our men, Brother Alan and his team, and the other men who are online here, we want to thank you. Oh my God, you wouldn't like to know how happy we are. And we know you're gentlemen, that you don't abuse. And we know you're in a loving and wonderful relationship and you're not being abused. But there are so many others out there who are challenged, who are in relationships. They are in love with persons, but these persons can't help themselves. And so they abuse, whether it be verbally, whether it be physically or otherwise. But we are here to support and we stand in solidarity of those persons who are in these relationships. And I am happy that there are avenues where you can actually seek assistance, seek remedies to the challenges that you might have out there. Thank you so much, Sister Latoya. We will continue the work. The work continues. That is what we can assure you. And we will do all in our powers to help. I know we did a course and we are supposed to be asking for the ratification of convention, ILO Convention 190. The sexual harassment bill is supposed to be passed, and the other acts and bills and so on that Sister Latoya mentioned at the end of her presentation. We pray for the day when we will have a wonderful workplace where there is no harassment, whether sexually bullying, whatever it is, and our homes are free from any harassment or any form of violence against, whether it is us as women, the men, or even our children. We have another presenter who is from Women's Inc. I know they are also involved in assisting our gender, whether it be male or female, that might have been abused or is being abused. I'm not sure if we have men center where we can actually have the men at the center, but I know we have a center for women and girls, and it's been utilized. I can assure you that it's been utilized, and I am hearing about others that are coming on stream, and it's a wonderful, wonderful feeling, because sometimes these women feel helpless because they have nowhere to go and they have to depend on the perpetrator or the persons who are actually meting out these abuse to them. And so today I am pleased to introduce to you Dr. Gillian Mason, a social activist who has been a member of Women's Inc. for more than a decade and served as vice president in charge of their facilities. She currently sits on their public education and legal reform committee. Professionally, she is a community psychologist and a lecturer in the Department of Sociology, Psychology, and Social Work at the University of the West Indies, Mona, where she does research on violence against women with a focus on violence in adolescent relationships. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome our sister, Dr. Gillian Mason. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Miles.
Sure.
I have a presentation, so if I can be allowed to.
Can we allow Dr.
Share my
Mason to
screen?
actually share the screen?
All right,
Share
while we're doing that, I just want to say how happy I am to be here with the Women's Action Committee of the Jamaica Civil Service Association, not just to present on behalf of Women Inc., which is an organization very dear to my heart, but I'm actually the product of two, well, now retired or deceased civil servants. So they, I know, are very pleased and very happy wherever they are to, that I'm getting this opportunity to speak with your organization. It's really great to hear about all the work that you have been doing over the years. It's very important, and part of my presentation today will be on helping, on breaking the silence and on what we can do. Yes. And you guys have already started doing that. So that is awesome, right? Some of what I'm going to talk about has been mentioned in previous presentations. So I'll just try and tailor it so I can focus more on the new information that I'll be sharing, right? Okay, so let's go. So this is what I'm hoping to go through. A lot of different interpersonal and personal violence terminology has been mentioned already, but I'm going to talk about those three of them, which persons we often use interchangeably, but they really are quite different. So I just want to make sure that we are clear on the distinction. When I talk about types of both violence against women and intimate partner violence, and the warning signs or things that we encourage persons to look out for potentially being in an abusive relationship. And then, as I said, really speak about how we can break the silence and the role that all of us can play. I'm going to end by talking about what does in and help end the partner violence. Okay, so the three violence terminology terms. I see my internet connection is unstable, so let me know if there are any problems, please. Gender-based violence, violence against women, and intimate partner violence. And as you can see from this diagram, they of course are all, but then there are also very important distinctions. So gender-based violence is kind of any kind of act, any violent act or harmful inflicted upon some their gender. And I have to pause the person, the underlying to do with, so somebody's behavior, they're trying to exert power over them. And this also the inequality. For there are these power and persons advantage of at a gender, right? Violence.
There's a problem with connection.
Different gender inequality. Based violence is a term which speaks, as I said, any act against a person based on their gender. But then we also have the issue against women, which in a, when gender-based violence is performed against women. Gender-based violence can be against violence against women. At least we have violence when they in this one of the perpetrators as a victim, current or former partners. So just for us to be clear on these terminologies, I'll be using the acronyms. We've been using them throughout the afternoon, so I think you're all familiar with them, right? So take home, we cannot talk about gender-based violence and interpersonal violence without talking about the power differential that exists among genders or between genders, and without realizing that really what the person is trying to do is exert some kind of control over somebody else. So we're going to talk about different types of violence against women and intimate partner violence. And some of them have already been mentioned, so I will brush over. So these first 5 I'm listing here are the ones that we tend to talk about a lot in Jamaica: intimate partner violence, sexual assault or rape, sexual harassment. And, you know, I know the Civil Service Association and Women's Action Group has a lot of work in its future with the passing of the bill to educate your members and educate the general Civil Service Association about what this means for them. Human trafficking, unfortunately, excuse me. Unfortunately, our presenter from the Ministry of Justice was not able to come today, but human trafficking is a big issue for Jamaica, both Jamaica as a transshipment point for persons, as well as persons being both trafficked into and out of Jamaica, and stalking, right? So those are the ones we commonly talk about in Jamaica, but I'll just briefly mention 3 others really that not as familiar or not occurring as much here, but also are important and relevant things to think about when we talk about violence against women. So child marriage, you know, in Jamaica, if I'm remembering the law correctly, children can get married from the age of 16, somebody's legislation, with the permission of their parents. But child marriage doesn't tend to be much of an issue here. But what we have found, especially the Women's Health Survey, which was done in 2016, the most recent national data we have about violence against women, they found out one of the vulnerable groups that we have in our country are minor girls who are cohabiting before the age of 18. So they're minors, right? So it's not child marriage, but they are in these marriage-like relationships. So child marriage, we have to find a term to use for our local context, but child marriage is an issue in Jamaica when we talk about violence against women, because there are a number of young girls, minors, who are living with adult males and are more vulnerable to being exposed to intimate partner violence. Female genital mutilation, as I said, I don't think I've ever heard of a case in Jamaica, but it's something just generally we need to be aware of. And again, it is the so-called cultural, but this is not a cultural practice, it's a violent practice where young girls in some countries have their genitals mutilated. They're cut. And really, again, as I said, this all has to do with control. The aim there is really to try and control any kind of sexual behavior of these young girls as they age. I mentioned formalized femicide, and I use the word formalized because, of course, we have femicide, unfortunately, in Jamaica, where women are killed by their partners. But formalized femicide, in terms of thinking of the practice of deliberately killing females because you know, they're not as valued in the society. So I think of the situation in China where, you know, they have their practice of only allowing their citizens, or had to have 1 or 2 children. And of course they want, well, I shouldn't say of course, many of them wanted males, and so the females were deliberately killed, right? So that's a nutshell about violence against women. I'm going to shift and talk about different types of intimate partner violence. Again, we see some of these were mentioned already. Ms. Miles talked about, you know, the possibility of physical, sexual, and psychological or emotional verbal abuse, right? And these are probably the ones that are going to come foremost to person's minds, but unfortunately, they're not the only ways that a partner can be violated by their current or former intimate partner. We can also think about, right, these next 4, where the possibility of financial or economic abuse. So controlling how much finances the person has, how much money the person has to spend, limiting what they can spend on it, what they can spend, coercing or intimidation, so that nothing physically involved, but still intimidating and trying to control the person's behavior. Stalking, which can be done by either a current or a former partner, and something we have to pay a lot of attention to, especially now in the time of COVID, when so many of us are using technology, digital abuse, right? So the use of technology to intimidate, to abuse somebody, right? And it can abuse them psychologically by sharing harmful or sharing, oh, I'm sorry, the word is escaping me, but saying negative things about them, right? Spreading rumors about them. Of course, we have heard of different instances where persons' personal, intimate pictures are shared, again, as a way to try and embarrass or discredit them. We're also concerned about digital abuse with our adolescents. This is something that is happening more and more. So those are different forms, and I'm going to talk about 2 other forms of intimate partner violence. And these 2 I left for last. I don't even want to say saving the best for last, but these are very important, the idea of isolation and controlling behaviors, because these also serve as our warning signs. So it is rare, well, it doesn't happen often where a perpetrator, their first act of violence against a partner is something that is physical or sexual, right? Oftentimes it starts with less obvious behaviors. And so we think about controlling behaviors, wanting to monitor where the person is going, what the person is doing, who they're talking to, what they're wearing, trying to isolate them from their support systems, right? Whether it be family or friends. And these 2 forms of intimate partner violence are particularly tricky, right? Because typical, and I'm sure if you reflect on intimate relationships you have had, when those relationships are first starting, it is only natural that you're going to want to spend a lot of time with this person. You're trying to get to know them better, and you kind of want to share things with them. You want to do things alone by yourself, right? So those are normal behaviors. Also, behaviors that we accept as being normal, though they don't have to occur, is this practice of somebody being jealous. So we look on, your partner saying, boy, who is that you're talking to? You make me feel jealous. And we kind of amused, or we take these things lightly and take these things as jokes, right? And sometimes they are jokes. I don't want to indicate that any instance of jealousy is an instance of abuse, but we have to be concerned if this is a continual pattern that your partner or that a partner demonstrates. So when it comes to isolation and controlling behaviors, there are potential warning signs. We want to, if you are in a new relationship and you feel, boy, this person kind of wants to know a little bit too much, they always need to know where I am. I always have to be checking in. Then you should be able to say, I'm not comfortable with this requirement of yours, right? That I check in with you. Yes, I'm going to let you know where I'm going and what I'm doing, but it can't be kind of on this regimented system. And then you can see how the person responds. Because again, for a good or a healthy intimate relationship, your partner should really be wanting the best for you, right? And wanting you to be the best that you can be. So they should be able to take these comments not as take these comments as they are shared, as they are meant, that okay, I feel uncomfortable when you do this, and therefore we should need to negotiate and navigate how we're going to both keep me safe or make you feel comfortable with my safety, but still recognize that I'm an individual and I have the autonomy to decide who and when and where I'm going to spend my time. Right?
Africa is in our country.
Right. So isolation and controlling behaviors, these are the things you want to look out for. Also, we also talk a lot about following your gut. Right. So quite often, somebody can say, boy, when you're coming by, where you're going to go, and we don't feel any way about it. But then after time, our gut, in Jamaica, we like to talk about this little our spirit. The spirit move us to the so and so. We need to pay attention a lot of times to that spirit, because oftentimes the spirit is telling us something a little bit off here, and maybe you want to take a step back. It doesn't mean that you have to end the relationship at that point. It doesn't mean, again, that the person necessarily wants to be or will be abusive, but you maybe want to take a little time to try and navigate and try and really observe what is going on in this situation. All right. So isolation and controlling behaviors are the warning signs. They're the kinds of behaviors that are going to occur most often at the start of an abusive relationship. And so you want to kind of take stock at that point, because as you can imagine, and as we observe, once you're in a relationship and the abuse is kind of full on, right? There's abuse is occurring. It's so much harder to end that abusive relationship. So what we really try and argue for is don't allow that relationship to get to that point. And so by paying attention to these controlling behaviors, noticing that this person, they don't want you to go and spend time with your parents, or you normally used to, have lunch with your friends or have lunch with your sisters, your siblings. And now they're like, why are you spending so much time with that person? They should want you to have those relationships. Those other relationships are important. So again, we just want to be aware. All right. So moving on, I want to talk about, as I said, I want to spend some time on breaking the silence. I think I'm still okay with time. And breaking the silence is, of course, very important, right? And I'm going to talk here in terms of, to talk about breaking the silence, talking about the context of gender-based violence, because it's important to realize, of course, gender-based violence doesn't occur in a vacuum. And so what I have here, this diagram I have here, is what we call the ecological system. And so it is recognizing that, yes, we have the individual woman, or in this instance, we're talking about a woman, right? Or I'm going to be talking about a woman, since even though gender-based violence happens to all genders, predominantly women are the victims. So I'm sticking to the kind of the typical and the typical narrative. So even though we have to be concerned about the individual, this woman, and her behavior and what happens or what is happening with her, we need to also recognize that there are all these other systems within our society that help to contribute to the occurrence of gender-based violence. So we have the microsystem, which is talking about small system. So the systems to which this woman directly interacts. So there is, of course, a couple, she and her partner, who I'll label as the abuser. There's a family to whom she belongs. There are her peers, if she's a young person or not so young person and going to school, or if she works. Any group that she belongs to, that is the microsystem, right? Then we have our mesosystem, which is the relationship between all these microsystems. So before I continue, I should also just point out that notice we have a kind of nested concentric circles here. So each of these systems impact on the other systems, right? And so it goes both downwards from the macro system to the individual. And of course, the individual also can have an impact on the larger systems. I'm going to put in my headphones because I'm not sure if you're hearing the cutting of the grass behind me, right? So along with the mesosystem, we then can talk about the exosystem, which is now kind of again at the larger level. So here we talk about our mass media, our community services, right? That would include our health services, our educational system, our religious systems, our economic systems. So we may think of them as, okay, these systems exist, and don't realize that these systems also contribute to the occurrence of gender-based violence. And at the largest level, we have to talk about our cultural values, our laws, our customs. So earlier, Mrs. Coburn Robinson was talking about all the changes to the laws that are occurring and more hopefully to come. This is important because this, of course, has an impact on what happens to that individual woman. So when we talk about breaking the silence around gender-based violence, we need to realize that the silence needs to be broken at all levels, right? It's not only about the woman who is being abused. All of us have a role, and I'm again really glad to hear how the Women's Action Committees is playing their role in helping to break the silence around gender-based violence. So I want to just mention, these are just a few potential ways that we can help to break the silence, and you will see as I go through that these fall at within different systems. So I start with the idea and the notion that we need to know your power. And this, I'm speaking here directly to the woman who is being abused. It's important for her, as Mrs. Miles said earlier, that quite often persons who are abused, they lose their, they tend to lose the self-esteem, they're not so sure about themselves, but they still do have power. Right? So they need to know their power and know that they can take action. But it also speaks to all of us to know our own power and that we can play a role in ending gender-based violence. Get informed, also mentioned before, right? That's another way. Knowledge is power, to build your power. So know about what is happening. Know about, as you are doing here, learn about the warning signs. Find out different ways you can help a friend, family, etc. Our values, I talked about values, and of course we have to think about our individual values as well as society's values. So what do you think about gender-based violence? What do you think about abuse? What do you think about perpetrators? What do you think about victims? What is it that our society is saying? What are the values that we are sharing to our young persons about valuing women, valuing boys, valuing girls, valuing men, valuing relationships, valuing healthy relationships? So you want to both examine what we think and what our society is putting forward, but then where we feel the need or find the need, we also need to challenge, because it's only in changing these values, only in changing attitudes that we're going to see real change in the level of gender-based violence that is occurring. Quite often, known or unknown, we're going to encounter victims and survivors of abuse, right? And when it becomes known, how are you going to respond? So three things that I want to emphasize here is take yourself out of it, right? Remove yourself. This is not about you. This is about the person who has experienced or is experiencing this violence. So you want to show empathy. You do not know what it is like to be in his or her shoes. Do not try and tell them what to do. You want to listen to them. You want to believe them. This is not a time for you to necessarily challenge. You don't need to find out the truth unless you're a police officer who is trying to, get some information to present to the court. You just need to be supportive, not be judgmental, be empathetic, right? believe the survivors. So often survivors of gender-based violence will not speak up because they fear that they're not going to be believed, right? And so only too often we hear, I'm sure each of you can think of a story that you have either read or know of personally where somebody spoke out and their story, their case went no further because they were not believed. So these are all the ways we can help to break the silence. These next three, again, speak to actions that we can take. And this, the first two, speaking up when someone crosses the line, not joking about gender-based violence. And, it's kind of hard and we kind of have to be aware. And I find that the more I spend doing this work, kind of the more aware I am, right? Because you hear people and they really do intend for it to be a joke, but gender-based violence is not a joke. And fortunately, you may not be experiencing it or nobody in your life, but there's somebody out there that this joke for them is, well, it's a joke for me, it's death to somebody else, right? So not only don't you want to joke about it, but if somebody says something in your presence with which you are uncomfortable, then speak up, right? I know when the sexual harassment bill really comes into force, there's going to be a lot of work around this, right? Because quite often we're in the workplace and somebody, makes some kind of joke or whatever, and the person is uncomfortable, just speak up, right? And the more we speak up, the more the person who said this is going to have to question themselves and say, okay, you know what? Even if they don't see something wrong with it, this person is offended or this person doesn't like when I say that, make that kind of statement. So I now need to check my behavior, right? We need to not minimize the violence in line with this thing about not joking about gender-based violence. So often, unfortunately, in Jamaica, we will hear persons in reference to young girls, especially, because those are the ones that normally reach into court, who, an adult male has had intercourse with them. And I'm going to say, and I'm not just a little sex. No, it is a big deal. The repercussions it can have for that young girl can be lifelong, right? So we can't minimize the violence. We don't want to excuse the perpetrator. Yes, of course, nobody is just a perpetrator, right? So the woman who abuses, the man who abuses, they're oftentimes, great financial providers. They're very friendly people. They're responsible persons, but they also have performed this act, and we want to hold them responsible for the performance of that act. So you don't want to excuse them, right? The fact that they are quote unquote good in all other aspects of their life does not negate that they performed this act and should be held responsible for doing it. Right? Another way to break the silence is to talk to others, especially young people, right? Let them know about the possibility of them being exposed. How do they respond if one of their friends tries something untoward with them? What are they to do? Who do they talk to? And it's very important with our young people, because in general, victims of gender-based violence don't seek help, but it is even more so for young people. So if we spend the time now, before anything happens to them, to talk to them about these issues, then they know that, hey, here is somebody who is a safe person who I can go to if I'm ever in need. Lastly, of course, volunteer. So you don't have to, fortunately for you guys, you don't have to go any further than your own association. You can volunteer, whether through the Women's Action Committee. There seems to be also a Male Action Committee. You can volunteer there. But even on your own, if you don't want to do it in your workplace, you can make comments publicly. So there is an incident recently, just yesterday, was or 2 days ago, the unfortunate killing of that teacher, right? Or the killing of the 6-year-old. Just writing to the Gleaner or the Observer, one of our newspapers, or even more so, and probably a little easier, social media. Most of us, if not all of us, are on social media. Something happens and somebody's talking about it on social media. You can make a comment on their comment, or you can start a thread yourself and say, boy, This is, you know, it is really unfortunate this happened. This should not be happening in our community. Again, the idea is to mobilize the general society so that all of us are taking action to break the silence and to end the gender-based violence. Okay, so wrapping up, talking about Women Inc. a little bit. So most persons know that Women Inc. is a non-governmental organization. We focus on issues to do with gender-based violence, and what you're seeing in front of you on the screen is our mission statement. So we really are aiming to strengthen the position of Jamaican women, and we do this through providing support services, through public education, and through advocating for legislative changes, right? And even though I must say that our mission statement specifically mentions Jamaican women, do not feel that we do not serve men. I heard Mrs. Miles mention earlier, and I'm glad that she did, that we do serve males as well. We may not serve them in some of our support services, specifically the shelter, but we do serve them through our counseling. We do serve them by advocating for legislative changes and through public education as well, right? And of course, by strengthening Jamaican women, we are also indirectly strengthening Jamaican man. So yes, we do provide services to all genders. In a nutshell, in terms of what we do, mention the counseling. We're probably best known for the crisis counseling that we provide and the crisis center that we run, which is both the hotline, 24-hour hotline, and I must pause and thank our volunteers who help us to run the hotline, as well as by providing crisis counseling and our emergency crisis shelter. Really great that, as Mrs. Coburn Robinson mentioned, that the national shelter, one has been opened, one is about to be opened, and there's to be at least one more, because we do need all the help we can get. And when I say we, I mean Jamaica, right? So it is really good that we have these national shelters coming up. We do have an emergency shelter, and we are also working to provide longer term shelter for abused women or women who are survivors of abuse. Right now, our crisis shelter is really for emergency. So somebody is in a really dire position and needs to be, needs to get away from that situation, and we can provide some shelter for our relatively short period, right? Unfortunately, we do not accommodate, we still do not accommodate males in our shelters, but our other activities are open to males, right? Public education, so obviously what I'm doing right now is one such example, and we really do try and want to educate persons about gender-based violence and about the different types of violence that can occur, and legislative change, right? So anytime there is any discussion within the parliament about any of the laws that really fall under our purview in terms of, so the sexual harassment bill, of course, the Sexual Offences Act, the termination of pregnancy, anything that falls within that, we are right there on our own or in conjunction with other NGOs trying to lobby for legislative change. So these are the ways in which we help, or we try to help to break the silence around gender-based violence. All right, so that wraps up my presentation. I hope I didn't go over time. Here is our contact information. First and foremost, our 24-hour hotline, 876-929-2977. I want to also mention that apart from helping persons who are recently victimized with our hotline, we also, of course, help who we call survivors, meaning persons for whom the victimization may have occurred a long time ago, but they're still dealing with the after effects of it. And maybe things have been great for many years, but you know what, today I feel a little bit down. Something may have happened that may have triggered or made me remember my experience, and I need to talk to somebody. The hotline is there for them. Also, the hotline is there for our supporters, right? So these families and friends of persons who have been recently or not so recently victimized, who want to either help their family or friends, or they themselves, having provided support for the family and friends, are kind of feeling a little jaded, and they themselves are, need some support themselves. So they, of course, are free to call the hotline. Our social media, hopefully persons will start following us. It's a really good way to get more information on this topic. And our general line is there, and there is some pictures of us in action. So I end there, hand back over to Ms. Miles, and hopefully there'll be some questions and we can discuss more on this topic. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Sister Mason. I have a whole heap to ask, and some of them are cultural and otherwise. Is it that our men are less educated than our women? Why we have them as being the main perpetrators?
Okay. Wow.
People keep saying that cockroach don't business in a foul fight. And so you will stand up and see the abuse and say nothing because you're going to be an informer. Some of these are our cultural norm.
Right.
And even the perpetrator, what it is that we do with the perpetrator, both to help him and to stop the abuse and so on. You looked at women who are being abused and not realizing that they are being abused because him love me, that's the reason why I'm doing it. Things like those.
Yes.
People will say, I'm jealous because the gentleman loved me, that's the reason why he hit me. I know somebody who is like that. If he doesn't hit her and treat her anyway, then she say he doesn't love her. So she loves when he's jealous and he quarrels and all the rest of that and so on. But at the end of the presentations, we're going to be looking at all of these angles, whether culturally or otherwise, how Jamaicans think about relationships, whether it's at work or it's at home, in our communities and so on. We look at these relationships differently. I don't business with it. She must know what she wants and all the rest of that. And we stand aside and watch it happen daily. Sometimes it's abuse at work. If you, the gentleman will tell you, you don't want to see anybody come into your desk to talk to you, or he comes and hoovers over you and he's looking in your bosom and all the rest of that. All of that is harassment. And I mean, but we will look more into it as we go along and ask the questions. Pardon me? Hello?
I think it was the recording that was.
Okay, so we will be asking all of these questions. We will be looking at them in depth as we finish up our presentations. We have with us Sister Sophia Gibson, and she is a representative from the Twin Island of Trinidad and Tobago. She will do a presentation, and after her presentation, then we will open the floor for all the questions and the comments and all the observations and so on. And I'm certain persons are rearing to go because they want to ask their questions. Sister Gibson, she is what you call it now? I call it OSH, which is Organizational Safety and Health Consultant, Educator, Administrator from the beautiful island, she says, of Trinidad and Tobago, the Republic of TNT. She has been involved in trade unionism and in the field of occupational safety and health for over 15 years. Additionally, for over 14 years, she has been employed with a tertiary educational institution where she is also the re-elected chair of the OSH committee. I call it OSH as short, which is Organizational Safety and Health. Sophia has worked with ACTRAV, ILO, and the Global Labor University as an external collaborator, tutor, and has tutored online courses in occupational safety and health, the elimination of violence and harassment in the workplace, digitalization of the workplace with focus on digital labor platforms and also just transition and green jobs, just to name a few. Safia completed the Masters of Occupational Safety and Health with the University of Turin and the Turin School of Development International Training Center of the International Labour Organization, ILO. During the second phase of this master's, she lived in Italy, visiting various industries, examining and understanding their occupational safety and health systems, and was also trained in different teaching styles, planning and implementing OSH policies, programs, and procedures. She has a deep interest in digital training and innovation, and as it relates to the world of work, occupational safety and health, and how it affects not only our lives at work, but how it affects our lives in general. In this changing world of digital education, there is a need to have the right balance of administrative and technical experience and the ability to apply comprehensive knowledge and context to international labor standards, qualities, and requirements. Safia possesses all of that. She is a resourceful and extroverted safety professional. Brothers and sisters, let us welcome Sister Safia Gibson. Sister Gibson, the floor is yours.
Hello, you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Nice, okay. I will thank you again for inviting me. Thank you very much. The presentations were well informative, and of course, some of the information that was shared is also part of my presentation. So I will go over some of the information that I do have, because we don't want to be saying the same thing over and over. And I know people are burning with questions from the previous presentation. So I will share my screen. I have a short presentation that I would like to share with you guys. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes, we are.
Yes, we are seeing it.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, so today I want to talk about the elimination of violence and harassment. Also more so too in the world of work and how it spills over into our personal lives and at home. So I wouldn't go over the definition, but this is the definition given by the WHO. And this basically is telling us that violence and harassment is a range of intolerable behavior and practices or threats thereof. Whether these are of single occurrences or it's repeated, that aims at or result in or is likely to result in physical, psychological, sexual, or economic harm, and includes gender-based violence and harassment. So gender-based violence and harassment, and as it speaks directly to more so to the Caribbean, violence and harassment directed at persons because of their sex or their gender, or affecting persons of particular sex and gender unduly so, and includes sexual harassment. So what we want to look out for, we want to understand that gender-based violence is unduly affected against unduly affected women and girls. Gender-based, and we have to remember that gender goes beyond just the dual approach that we know nowadays. It's more than just a dual approach, and we have to think of ways of tackling its underlying causes and what are the risk factor, the causes and the risk factors. We have to understand ways to tackle this. Most commonly, and as some of the previous presenters would have spoken on, is that most commonly violence experienced by women globally is physical violence inflicted, sadly, by intimate partners. On an average, at least 1 in 3 women are beaten, coerced into sex, or otherwise abused by their intimate partner in the course of her lifetime. And within the Caribbean, violence against women, this is very pervasive. I just want to reiterate, although some of the other speakers spoke on it, in many cases, gender-based violence or violence, this is something that occurs in a place where we want to think of as our sanctuary, our home. The home, for many women, their home is not that safe place, it's a dangerous place. And women, unlike men, are more likely to be beaten or sometimes killed, and not by a but by someone that they know. It might be a husband, a boyfriend, a partner, and sometimes it could also be a co-worker. Gender-based violence affects a cross-section of women, and it is not confined to a specific group of women or of any type in society, but it takes place within a large context of gender inequality. So I just thought that we just touch on that a little bit. So as I was saying before, the gender-based violence, especially in the Caribbean, is very pervasive, and this pervasiveness of violence against women in the Caribbean has been highlighted in a recent report by the United Nations. And according to this report, violence against women affects a significant percentage of women and girls in the Caribbean. 3 of the top 10 recorded rape rates in the world, and this is to be talking about in the world, occurs in the Caribbean. While the worldwide average of rape was 15 per 100,000, we see that in the Bahamas, the average is 133, in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, 112, Jamaica, 51, Dominica, 34, Barbados, 25, and in Trinidad and Tobago, 18. And the report further pointed out which revealed that in 9 Caribbean countries, 48% of adolescents and adolescent girls, sexual initiation was forced or somewhat forced. And I have a link that goes on further to this study that I would share with you guys in the chat later on. So what do we do? Thankfully, we have the ILO Convention 1980 and the recommendations 206. And the ILO Convention is a binding international treaty creating obligations for those states or those countries that have ratified it. Thus far, we have 7 countries that have ratified the convention, and this convention is in place so that everyone could be free from violence and harassment in the world of work, including gender-based violence and harassment. And the recommendations are there to provide guidance on how to implement the convention. And the convention and the recommendations are the first international labor standards on violence and harassment in the world of work. I just want to point out that last year, when they celebrated the global 16 of activism against violence, they welcomed the development of the ILO Convention C190. And with this being enforced, they hope to transition that is not just looking at these 16 days, but we want to look at, and as Sister Latoya would have said, for the entire year, for 365 days, we want to have that year-round activism. And the campaign continues to work closely with activists, governments, trade unions, human rights mechanisms, the UN, and all other allies to alleviate the issues of gender-based violence in the world of work. And we want to call for the ratification of the Convention 190 in the Caribbean and in all of our countries. So that's where we're pushing. We are pushing towards getting this convention ratified, because as I said before, once we have it ratified, it's binding, and then the government would be obligated to ensure that better protection is put in place. So violence and harassment, the convention is a strong focus on the prevention, including addressing the underlying risk factors and causes of violence and harassment, and the way to overcome them in occupational risk assessments, and expanding on their role to cover psychosocial risk and gender-based violence in the world of work or in the workplace. And in Article 9, it sets out some obligations on the government to prevent violence and harassment, including positive duties on the employers and to protect workers. And all this is done in consultation with workers and their representatives to adapt and implement a workplace policy on violence and harassment, and also to take into account associated psychosocial risks in management of occupational safety and health. We want to look at to identify the hazards and assess the risk of violence and harassment and take measures to prevent and control them. We want to provide workers and other persons who may be concerned or involved with information, with training, and we want to have this information and training in an accessible format so that the in the association for protection and prevention measures as laid out in the Convention 190. And as one of the other presenters would have indicated, and during the COVID-19, there has been an increase in violence and harassment. Across the world, you see that there have been an increased reporting against violence and harassment. We're talking about against persons who work in frontline services. We're talking about increased incidents of violence, particularly during the when we were during the lockdown, when workers or women would be at home doing teleworking. You see there was an increase in violence and harassment during the COVID-19 pandemic, and it has, because of this, we find that we see trade unions are now doing more negotiations and new guidelines and workplace support or to adapt the already existing policies that we have in place and how to make them relevant to those persons who are doing teleworking or working remotely. So some of the core principles of the Convention 190, it is therefore protecting those in all sectors in the informal, in the formal economy, in the rural and in the urban areas. It addresses violence and harassment through labor, equality and non-discrimination, occupational safety and health, migration and criminal law and policies. And it looks at addressing discrimination, abuse of power relationship and gender norms that support violence and harassment. So it's ensuring accessibility to information and tools and training, as I said in the previous slide. So what we want to look at when with the elimination of violence and harassment, especially in the world of work, and something that sometimes people look over or take for granted, is the psychosocial risks that are involved with violence and harassment. And the psychosocial risk can most times arise from the poor work design, poor organization and management, poor social context of work. This can cause negative psychological, physical, and social outcomes such as work-related stress, burnout, depression, and of course, the dreaded violence and harassment. And below you can see some of the working conditions that lead to psychosocial risks, like excessive workload, conflicting demands, and lack of role clarity, lack of the involvement of making decisions on the way the work is done, poorly managed organizational change, job insecurity, ineffective communication, lack of support from management and also from the colleagues, and psychological and sexual harassment and third-party violence. So what we want to do, how is it addressed? We address this by looking at prevention and protection, enforcement and remedies, and guidance and training. And in order to do this, we should and will have to do a risk assessment. So you're doing a risk assessment to identify the risk. Then you assess the risk, and we come up with ways to mitigate the risk of violence and harassment. So the first thing we do is we carry out this risk assessment. We have to now integrate violence and harassment into whatever existing risk assessment we may have at the workplace. If we don't have one, then we now carry out a standalone risk assessment or on violence and harassment, or even address urgent risks that have been identified. Example, when there is risk or domestic violence spilling over into the workplace. And draw up a tailored safety plan. So in order to do this risk assessment, there's 5 steps to risk assessment of violence and harassment. And I will quickly go through these steps with you guys. Step 1 is we're looking at the existing risk assessment. What we need to ask ourselves is, does the existing risk assessment include violence and harassment? Does the risk assessment cover psychosocial risks, including factors such as work organization, work insecurity? Does it include third-party violence and harassment in the different sectors where they are relevant? Does it cover gender-based violence and specific to risks faced by female workers, and particularly women, experiences of violence and harassment? Are these experiences included in our most recent risk assessment? These are things that we look at. It's our first step. Our second step is risk from working conditions and work organization and human resource management. So what we have to look at is we have we're looking at have our risk of violence and harassment being identified and assessed properly. Example, stress resulting from organization of work, example, shift, our work, the shift of our work and the way that work is organized. Is there a lack of control over our work, over the location of the work or work processes? Are we now working late hours or very early shift? Are we allowing our women to be walking through maybe lonely areas? Is the parking lot of lonely areas? Are there, when they're finished working or coming to work, have access or availability to public transport? We're looking at where they're actually working and if they're working in isolation. So it is important to not to overlook that, especially during this COVID-19. Are we asking them to attend training or meetings outside of the workplace or outside of the working time? Are we extending, because this is also a form of could lead to psychosocial violence, where we're asking persons to work outside of the working time that they will usually. We take for granted that work is now doing teleworking, so we expect people to respond to emails and respond to the tasks that we have at any point in time, and this cannot be so. So we also have to look at inadequate or poorly implemented human resource procedures, lack of workplace policy, and we're looking at the complaint procedure that is it a trusted procedure that we have? Lack of training and awareness on risks faced by specific group of workers, especially female workers. We need to look at that in our second step. In our third step, we want to look at risk from third party. This is from customers or from members of the public, and these are things sometimes we take for granted when we looking at our risk assessment. Have the risk been assessed for their impacts on workers? For example, culture of aggression from customers, particularly affecting women who work alone or in isolation. Is the work situations where customers have physical access to workers. Example, you find now that sometimes people are very violent. I did a research last year where we found that people were physically violent with frontline workers and with the health workers. So we have to also look at how this type of violence is affecting these workers. We look at the exposure to a hostile work environment where customers might be, the customers might be stressed, they might be intoxicated, and then they become very aggressive with our workers. So do we have to look to make sure that we don't have a poor system for addressing third-party violence and harassment and making complaints. We know sometimes we want to say the customer is right, but we have to pay attention and make sure that when there are complaints about third-party violence, that we take it seriously and we don't just brush it off and say, well, we have to, the customer is always right. No, we have to really look at this and look at the responding and learn from the cases that went before. So it's important also for us to identify the need for training and guidance with the potential, where there's potential incidents of violence and harassment. Example, dealing with violent, as I said, violent customers in high-risk locations and situations. And then this will take us to step 4. And in step 4, we're looking at risks linked to discrimination, of gender inequalities, abuse of power, and social norms. So when we look at this, we have we're looking at have the risk of violence and harassment being assessed for their impacts on workers arising from gender inequalities leading to sexist attitudes and unconscious biases. We're looking at discrimination, multi-discrimination, for example, multi-discrimination against gender, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, religion, and age. We're looking at the risk to women and women's reproductive and sexual health. Are we providing provisions of proper bathroom facilities? Is there a lack of job security after maternity? These are things that people are worrying about now, that increases psychosocial risk, and it's a form of violence. It's a form of violence and harassment in the workplace. Is there a low number of women in senior or leadership positions? These are things that we have to look at. And the work culture that devalues or belittles women or other groups even that are not conform to our social norms or a dominant masculinity. And a very important step is the mitigation of the risk and prevention plan. And we need to, in step, we're looking at, we have to assess the gaps in the existing mitigation measures and prevention plan in addressing psychosocial risk and violence and harassment, such as third-party violence, and violence and harassment and gender-based violence. And if there are gaps, so we need to come up with ways, suggest ways to address these and make recommendations to address these risks for future prevention plans. For example, we can have like safety measures to ensure that women do not work alone, particularly at night. We could have alarm systems and security to assist women who may be working in isolated areas and they are maybe in a difficult situation. Make sure that we have security in place, make sure there's a safety planning, incident response training, and raise awareness amongst workers, amongst women. And remember, include gender responses and gender response approach. We want to ensure that consultation with workers and ensure that women have a voice and they feel comfortable raising their voice. And we must have effective and trusted measures of complaints, a complaint system. Too often you find that women don't come forward, or people don't come forward on when they are being abused, when they're in a situation of violence, because we like to exercise the one-person rule where we share very sensitive information. Let us have a trusted system where persons could come to us and reach out, and without, as Dr. Mason was just explaining, without judgment, without just have a place that's safe, that they don't feel ashamed, they don't feel like you're going to spread their personal information, that they come to you and you sharing the information. So we must have that trusted of sharing their complaints. And when we addressing risk assessment, we must look at domestic violence. And also, although most of my presentation spoke to the elimination of violence and harassment in the world of work and in the workplace, we recognize that domestic violence risk assessment are an important basis for workplace safety and a workplace safety plan. A preamble to the Convention 190 recognizes that domestic violence is a form of workplace violence, noticing that domestic violence can affect employment, productivity, health and safety, and that governments, employers, workers, organizations, and labor market institutions can help as part of the measures to recognize and respond and address the impact of domestic violence. And we see that, as I said before, many employers and trade unions are involved, as we see that as shown, and as we see that you all have parting in this 16 days negotiating with workplace and changing the policies and giving support to survivors of domestic violence, enabling them to continue working in a safe place and a safe environment. So things that we want to remember and be suggesting for our next step, we want to make sure and just check the existing risk assessment and assess whether they are comprehensive and in line with the elimination of violence and harassment in the workplace. And do they assess the psychosocial risk? We want to check the existing workplace policy and update them so that they cover at least the minimum standard, at least. We want to provide a checklist for training and guidance, not just for the trade unionists, but for negotiators on workplace policy, risk assessment, including psychosocial risk. And we have to also remember, even though our countries have not yet ratified the Convention 190, we can use this as a blueprint to use for when we are negotiating with employers and use this in our form of activism. And one thing I want to say just before I wrap up, this is my last slide, is that there is a growing evidence on what works to prevent violence and harassment against women. And based on a well-designed evaluation that was done in 2019 by the WHO and United Nations Women, there's an endorsement for from 12 other UN and bilateral agencies that published something called RESPECT, Respect Women, a framework for preventing violence against women aimed at policymakers. So each in this framework, there's each letter RESPECT there stands for one of 7 strategies. The first strategy, the first R stands for relationship skills and strengthening. The E stands for empowerment of women. The S stands for service ensured. P, poverty reduced. The second E, enabling environments, school, work, the workplace, the public spaces created. And the C, children and adolescent abuse prevented. And T, transformed attitudes, beliefs, and norms. And I will share in the chat with you the 2 links that the link for this are this Respect Women framework and the previous link that the UN had concerning there's a meter that shows the violence and to keep abreast of what's happening in the Caribbean here. So this is what my small take on violence and harassment and gender-based violence, and I would end here. So thank you for allowing me your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Sister Gibson, for that presentation on harassment and violence in the workplace. We are going to have some questions, probably about 5 or so questions. And you will direct your question to the person who best has the expertise to answer the question. So brothers and sisters, are there any questions you wish to ask of our panelists or presenters?
Yes, good afternoon. I had one.
Good afternoon, Brother Alan. You may go ahead.
All right. Thanks a lot. And let me just add my commendation to the team for a very good forum so far, the information presented has been very educational for me and some very good reminders. Just quickly, the previous presenter, I can't remember her name, sorry about that, because I'm moving, but the doctor who mentioned that underage marriages, she mentioned that those, a lot of those are in our Jamaican context, and she would have mentioned that it would have been not that they're married, but they're 18 and in those type of relationships, and it was counted. I just wanted to know what was the percentage of female girls in Jamaica now experiencing that type of situation.
All right.
Mr. Mason?
Thanks very yes, I'm here. Thanks very much for that question, Mr. Carter. Unfortunately, I don't have the percentage on me on hand. I'd have to invest. I'd have to look it up. But I just remember that when that research was done, this group kind of emerged as it was a group that hadn't been really examined before, and here it was that there's a good percentage of minors who are living, cohabiting, and then, as I said, that they were more vulnerable. Again, comparing them to non-minors who are cohabiting, their rate of violence was high. So that was why there is concern about that particular group. But I'd have to look it up and let you know. I don't have the percentage on hand. It wasn't my research. It was a national study on a women's health survey.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much.
As a follow-up.
Yes, Brother Hutchinson, go ahead.
Yes, as a follow-up to Dr. Mason, did you find out of that research, was there economic basis why those young ladies found themselves in that situation? Was it a case where their mothers knew of it and projected them into it? Did the research show that as well?
Right. So this study, and again, remember, it's not my work, but from what I read, they didn't get into that, but just kind of anecdotally, historically, quite often that economic press is involved with those kinds of relationships, whether it is that the minors' parents or mothers are aware, or sometimes they don't have anybody else to whom to look for support other than this male who is offering financial support. So definitely the economic press is definitely a part of it, even though I don't think that research actually investigated it, but I would expect that it would be a major role. It would play a major role.
Thank you.
Sister Madge Betty, thank you so much, Dr. Mason. Sister Madge Betty, I notice your hand is raised.
Yes, good afternoon, colleagues.
Good afternoon.
I want to say excellent presentation from all the presenters. The Women Rights Committee, when you were making a presentation, you spoke about support for women in the public sector. I want to know, how do you go about getting assistance if you're being bullied in the work environment by females, either managers or other senior persons? How do you go about getting some assistance, or what is the procedure to get some help from the Women's Rights Committee? Thank you.
Sister Coburn Robinson, Sister Mason.
Sorry, I'm so sorry. I thought that question was directed to the association. She was asking procedurally what would be done. So I can only speak for Women Inc. that we don't provide support for bullying in the workplace. We'll more be focused on sexual harassment And as Mrs. Coburn Robinson mentioned earlier, the harassment bill has been passed and will soon be in place. And one of the things which I'm hoping the association will be spending quite a bit of time on is educating its members about what is entailed in the bill, which also outlines, I think as Ms. Beatty was asking, what the steps would be for anybody who has a complaint. There's first an internal procedure, which therefore means that each ministry or each governmental agency has to have internal procedures for handling complaints by an employee. And then if things cannot be resolved there, then the complainant would have the option of taking it to the tribunal to have his or her case heard. So that's it in a nutshell. I'm sure Mrs. Coburn Robinson can provide additional details.
Sister Betty, if it cannot be handled at the local level, which is in your organization, then you have avenues where you can take it further. And I am certain Sister Coburn, Robinson should be able to give us some information if she's still here with regards to how one deals with harassment in the workplace.
Okay, I'm sorry, I was multitasking. So in terms of the harassment, I mentioned just when I'm making my presentation that it is no law. The name of it is the Sexual Harassment Protection and Prevention Act 2021. And there's a section that mandates persons who are heads of organizations to make sure that there is a policy. If it is that they don't yet have a sexual harassment workplace policy, that they create a document that is very clear in terms of the position that they are taking in the organization. So there is a zero tolerance approach to any form of discrimination, violence, and the 9 yards. So the head of that entity has that responsibility to make that abundantly clear to the workers. And in the case where there is no policy, to create one, certainly, as quickly as possible. One of the obligations that they have is that they should find a way to use the template. There is a template that is provided for them. We have been doing sensitizations, for example, the number of ministries, departments, agencies, and other public spaces. And that's going to be extended to private spaces as well. So there's a simple template that can be used to just craft what it is that they are taking from the legislation itself. And that's something that we've been working on, working with them to make sure. But for those who have not yet had the sensitization, come 2020, that's one of the reasons Minister asked today, how do we put this forward? Now that the date is saying 2nd day of November 2021, this is when it was inked by the Governor General, it got his assent. We're looking at January 2022, where we are going to be rolling out across Jamaica for those who have not yet had the sensitization to make sure that they are compliant with it. So in the absence of that, if you have a grievance policy or you have the Staff Establishment Act, which does make the staff code rather, which does make the staff code for public sector, it does make reference to, while not as explicit as it should be, there is reference to behavior that would not be allowed in the workplace and what can be brokered. Now the HR has a responsibility, as usual. You are HR, Miss Miles, so you are very aware of the fact that persons would make their complaints, and as much as possible, there should be a complaints and redress mechanism that allows persons to know that they lodge their complaint and something happens. Yes. There's also going to be, based on the legislation, a section that deals with the tribunal. The Sexual Harassment Tribunal, which has been developed now, once it comes on stream, cases that are reported, if they report to us or they report to the Ministry of Labour and Social Security, or they report to their HR, will be accelerated to the Sexual Harassment Tribunal. But the middle ground is that we are to have authorized officers that are assigned to the Bureau. Those persons will take the complaints in a non-discriminatory and confidential manner, so the person can explain clearly what took place. So we advise persons to write everything that happened, just be very clear and comprehensive in terms of the chronology of the the harassment, how it happened, where it happened, if there were any persons around who witnessed it. They could be affidavits or they could be witnesses to also share their story or their account of it, and to submit that as soon as possible. And to make sure that the persons who get the report, that is the HR or your supervisor or the head of the entity, has a responsibility to act upon that. There is some amount of responsibility that is placed at the head of the entity and the HR to make sure that once persons lodge their complaint, that the follow-up is done. And of course, we are here with our legal team. We have the legal officer in our ministry and other legal persons, because as you know, they have tried to streamline the legal support in the ministry department agency. So it's sort of a little easier now to get that kind of support. So all is not lost. Once a person makes a complaint, then there is a mechanism that kicks in. What we're trying to do is to make sure that come January 2022, persons are very clear on the responsibilities, because at this point we recognize not everybody is sure about what is happening. So the sensitization, public awareness and sensitization drive has to take place across. We started it, but we are aware some persons are still not aware for whatever reason. So there's going to be a very large scale public education and sensitization and awareness raising on the legislation, which is now approved, so that persons are aware of it. But everybody has to understand that there should be no harassment, but in the event that it happens, there are specific steps that need to be taken. And we are guided by the legislation as well as the policy that guided this legislation, the anti-sexual harassment legislation, anti-sexual harassment policy rather, which was used to inform this particular legislation. So I hope that I have provided the clarity that is required.
Yes, yes, sister. Sister Betty?
Hello, I'm here.
Yes, are you satisfied with the response?
Yes.
You have
I'm
your
very-
local level, and
I'm
beyond
very
that, then you will have a tribunal if
Okay,
you
I'm
are
very
not satisfied.
about- Yes, ma'am. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Or any other questions? I would like to ask a question
Janet.
of the presenters. What of the perpetrators, whether it be male or female, who have been doing the abuse, who have meted out the abuse? What happens to that individual other than charging the person? What do we do for these persons so they don't become repeat offenders?
Okay, so I could start. I've mentioned earlier that there is a new thrust to ensure that we're the persons, whether male or female, because perpetrators are not bound by sex, meaning it could be a male or a female perpetrator. Once somebody has been reported as a perpetrator, then what kicks in is that all of the mechanisms should
When this meeting
work
finished,
together.
Mary done?
Not yet.
Hello, Sister Tisha?
Yes, sorry about that.
Sure.
Thank you. So the court system would kick in because, of course, we understand that sometimes that's where the reports come from, the court. Somebody has done something wrong and it gets to the court. So what we have done is to try to form a relationship with the restorative arm of the Ministry of Justice to look at how can we use that already existing restorative justice framework to make it a little more expansive and gender sensitive, so that persons who come to the court system or are referred to the police or referred because somebody, named them, they reported to Woman Inc., to Sisoka, to Victim Services Division, to the Bureau, to any of the service providers, to the DBI care centers, any of those spaces. How is it that we move forward with that? And how do we take the complaints and move forward? So we have started a pilot with the Ministry of Justice, and it is that the program is called Refocus Perpetrator Program. And the reason it's called Refocus is because we recognize that for too long, the focus has been, in many cases, the victims or the survivors.
Yes.
And so the refocus means we want to now look carefully at these persons who are perpetrators to see how it is that, I know that persons have been doing work along the way, because we've had the male batterers program, the batterers intervention program. We've had that, but what has happened is that in some cases, it's just a project support and persons got a cycle. So they did it for a year, 6 months, 2 years, whether short-term, long-term. I don't even know if they have gone as long as 5 years. And we've had this support from under the Hubert Bill. That was the most recent one we had. But again, that did, and then there was the There's one that came out of the Ministry of National Security that looked at those persons who ran afoul of the law and needed support. So what we are seeing and what we have been told in terms of the consultative process is that it needs to have a process that is not a start and stop, but something that continues throughout. So our NSAP that I mentioned before, the National Strategic Action Plan, it allows for a continuation of the probe, the interrogation, and the support that is required for perpetrators. And this is a concerted effort that we're going to make sure that this complaints and response protocol that I spoke about earlier, this complaints and response protocol, what it does is it says once a complaint is made, how do we treat with the complaint from the first complaint is made all the way to when it is resolved. Whether it is that the person faces their day in court, they get psychosocial support and counseling that allows them to see the wrong that has been done, acknowledge it, and start on a path that allows them to change that paradigm, just have a paradigm shift. So you're doing this because this is what is required. In some cases, we have found that some people who are violent is because they were victims of violence. They either experienced it or they witnessed it, and there was no intervention or the intervention was not consistent. And so they have not recovered sufficiently and now they are acting it out. So it's the experts that we know that are very familiar with what is happening. They have been trained. We've also looked at research in other jurisdictions, regional and international. And based on all of that and all of the conversations and consultations, we have crafted something which we believe we can do with partners, and we're not doing it on our own, with partners to see how best we can interrogate, to see how we can help these perpetrators. But once a perpetrator has been put forward, it's a zero tolerance approach to it. The person must acknowledge that there's a wrong that has been done, look at all the repercussions, all of the parties involved, and together, making collective and individual actions, we try to solve it.
Okay, thank you, Sister Coburn. Sister Keisha?
Yeah, Sister Geraldine. And on that note that Sister Coburn mentioned, partnership, I was just saying that we are 30,000 strong and we have the platform, we have the reach. And so we are volunteering at this time to partner with you so that when you're in the process of doing your public education and rolling out, that you remember the JCSA and the WAC, and so that we can work together to get the word out to the persons.
Right.
I just wanted to put that in and just wanted to thank you, all of you. I mean, persons are leaving. We currently have 41 from 63. So I just wanted to personally thank just the team, the presenters. The information was quite informative. And we look forward to a part 2 because it seems that this particular topic is of interest to all of us.
Yes.
And we should continue the dialogue and the conversation so we keep the discussion at the forefront of our minds. And so I just wanted to say that and to thank everybody for participating and hand it back over to the virtual lecturer, to Sister Geraldine.
Oh, thank you so much, Sister. You took everything from me. I was going to talk about our partnership, both with Women's Inc. and also with the Bureau of Gender Affairs. We must partner with you to bring all of these challenges to the fore. We have the JCSA, Sister Betty. If you're having challenges, you can also visit walk into our organization at JCSA and you can get some help. You can get some advice as to how you can deal with the situations that you might have. And to everybody who is on the platform, just remember that the JCSA as an arm that deals with our industrial relations, whether it be sexual harassment, whether it be bullying, whatever it is, then you can come in and you can get information from us. You can get advice from us also. And these are some of the forums that we are putting forward in order to empower women or men. And we are happy to have the men, as I said before. Thank you so very much. Sister Gibson, Sophia had to leave because she says she's an hour ahead of us and she's still at work and she need to get something done. But want to thank everybody. Sister Tisha has already put forward a vote of thanks. Want to thank you so much. And as she said, we might have to have a part 2. Sister Coburn, we're asking you, do not leave us out when you are doing your empowerment, when you're doing your what you call it, your education in terms of
Public
the bill
education.
and so on. We have members who need to know all of this information and to make themselves aware of the contents of that policy, that bill, that act that is supposed to be part of our system come next year. Are there, I see Sister, your Aunt Tisha, your hand is still raised? Or you have gotten
No,
a
no,
chance?
we actually started the work from the JCSA to look at the bill itself. And we are indeed aware of some of the provisions. And so that is the reason why I noted that we need to partner so that we're on the same page in communicating the information, because we did give feedback in relation to the revision of the bill. So we participated in that process. It's just now that we need to communicate to the wider membership so that they're aware of the provisions. Yes.
Okay.
So that is the point I wanted to make, but I had already made a point. I'm gonna lower my hand now.
Okay, great. No problem. Ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank you. We have passed our time that we were supposed to end. It is so interesting. I could go on for another hour because the information is needed. It is interesting. There are a few questions that I have to ask, but I have to leave it at that. Thank everybody. Thank the presenters. Very informative and empowering information that you have given us. I'm glad to know that we are moving forward as a nation and in protecting our women, our girls, and our men. We continue to strive for excellence in terms of ending, and as a matter of fact, ratification of ILO 190 and the recommendation 206, where we have minimized sexual harassment, whether it's in the workplace, and usually what happens in the workplace spills over into the community, into our society. So all of it is connected, and we have to try to minimize or to stop, if possible, all of the mayhem that is happening. Want to thank you so very much. Thank my co-host, Sister Latoya, who has worked assiduously with me, and the others, other committee members who are here, who made this possible. Thank you so very much. Thank our presenters who took time out to be with us to make the presentation, and our audience who has paused from work to actually sit and listen to us, what we have to say. We want to thank you so very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we ask that you continue to work with us, continue to be a part of this movement that we are starting and moving on and advocating for the harassment and sexual harassment and violence to be eliminated from our society. We are going to have a music video again, Stop the Violence Against Women by Christopher Martin. I'm certain some of you would know it. We're going to ask you to sing along as we tell you goodbye, tell you thanks. And tomorrow we will have our candlelight vigil where we are inviting you to come. The link will be sent out tomorrow morning, I'm certain. By now the link is ready to be sent for our vigil tomorrow evening at 6:30. We're asking you to join us in honor of Nevia Sinclair. She was killed in Manchester by her common law spouse, and we are honoring those who have survived. We have persons who will be giving their testimony, so we want you to come out and listen to some of the things, because some of these things that happen, the risks, they are subtle and we might not pick them up, but if somebody was gone through it, talk and tell you what they experienced, then probably you will be able to understand and realize what is happening. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, thank you so very much and have a wonderful evening. See you tomorrow evening again. Bye. Listen to our music here as we end our presentation. Not hearing any sound, Sister Latoya? What is happening? Not hearing much.
Without a woman, tell me, can you? I would never hurt a woman. All who believe in prayer, we all need to pray. Can't believe what is happening. These must be the last days. Times are getting scary. The devil's in a rage. Women and children are a target now. We need to see a change. We're losing too many women. Stop the violence against women. We need to love our women and take care of the women. Stop abusing the women. We're losing too many women, yeah. Stop the violence against women. We need to love our women, take care of the women, stop abusing the women. Young girls beware, there are predators out there, don't trust people. They act as if they care, they are wolves in sheep clothing, they are evil.
This Walter is finished?
So don't just go on any taxi.
I can't turn off this thing yet. I have to wait until this is finished. Persons are leaving, but
So step out for every day. Don't make night get you too far from home. Don't get a loved one's nervous. Just think before you act now, pretty. Time is so useless. Now to my big woman friend them. Stop steer with the madman them. If every day my beat you and I'll treat you one day your life in a problem. Girl, don't make true money. Stay and fight because it's better you leave if you not treat you right. But don't disrespect and stay out at night. But well, at these days you will lose your life. We're losing too many women. Stop the violence against women. We need to love our women and take care of the women. Stop abusing the women. We're losing too many women, yeah. Stop the violence against women. We need to love our women, take care of the women, stop abusing the women.
Okay. Yes. Oh, the actual form.
But the one with the leader,
Bye, everyone. Thank you. Thank you,
So it is
Natia.
done.
Bye. Bye, guys. Bye,
Everybody. Thank you again,
Take
guys.
care. Take
Well
care.
done, JCSA. Well
Job
done.
well done. Yeah, man. And we will play our part. Don't worry.
Yes.
bye. Take care.
Losing too many women. Stop the violence against women. To love women, take care of the women, stop abusing the women.
Thanks, Mintu.
Too many women, yeah. Stop the violence against women. Stop it, stop it. We need to love our women, take care of the women, stop abusing the women. I can't live without a woman.
Thank you, Chair. Bye.
Bye. Take care.
Galataya.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for coming and joining. Okay.
Stop the violence against women. We need to love our women, take care of the women, stop abusing the women. Stop the violence against women. Ooh, just stop the women. I can't live without a woman. Never hurt a woman.
Bye, everybody. Looking forward to part 2.
Yes, but thank you for joining.
You are so very welcome. I enjoyed every second of it.
Yes, thank you. We'll talk.
Certain.
I'll message you.
Certain.